Today on Your Money, it's our roadmap to retirement. Are you on track to retire on time, or do you need to boost your savings? Grant Meyer and I are breaking down the numbers so you can have a happy retirement. Welcome to Your Money. I'm Gordon Severson, here to help you save, spend, and invest your money wisely. Today I'm joined by Grant Meyer from TrueMix Advisors, and today we're talking about retirement. Thank you so much for joining us in studio here.
Awesome to be here.
And we're going to do things a little differently here. Grant and I are working on an episode, this roadmap to retirement. I'm sure you get this question all the time from your clients. Am I saving enough money for retirement?
It is a very common question, and it's a tough one to answer because there are so many variables out there. How old you are, what your lifestyle is, what your retirement wishes are, how soon or early do you want to retire, do you like your job, what's your health span, are you single, are you married, do you have kids? So there's a lot to break down. It's a very common question. People always want to know, am I on track? Am I hitting the numbers where I need to be?
And for this episode, the way we're kind of organizing things is that we're going to break it down by age so you can kind of see if you're on track. We're going to be going 25 to 30 to 35 to 40. And we're also going to be using two different recommendations from Fidelity and JP Morgan. They each have a different perspective when it comes to how much you should have saved up in your retirement account. And Grant and I will break down the numbers for each age group, starting at 25, going all the way to 65. And let's start out here at 25. Fidelity, this one is kind of a freebie here. They don't have any numbers yet. They encourage people to start saving around 15% of your annual income at 25. JP Morgan, however, says at $50,000 a year in income for your household, they want people to have $5,000 saved up by age 25. If you have $150,000 of household income, they want people to have $25,000 saved up by 25. What do you think about that?
They're great targets. I personally really like that 15% savings rate is where I tilt. The higher the savings rate earlier on in life, it does something magical. Number one, you're putting a little bit more away when you're young, and that has the greater potential to grow. The other thing is it reduces your lifestyle, so you're not tempted to spend more and keep up with the Joneses, which then means you're more likely to hit your retirement numbers. So the 15% is a great target to aim for.
And I like that they seem to understand that. I mean, for a lot of people, they're just into the workforce. They're 25. There's a lot of expenses. Some people are paying off student loans at that point. So they're a little more lenient, understanding that you have a lot going on in your life at this point.
Just starting, rather than focusing on how much money, just starting and building up the habit is going to be a super important thing. Student loan debt, obviously navigating that. And then another thing I like to think about when we're just starting off is building up credit. Later on in life, we're going to need to buy a car, a house. We're going to need a good credit score. So having good money habits when we're young pays dividends in the future.
Great. Let's move on to 30. Fidelity says by age 30, you should have 1 times your annual salary saved up. So for example, if you make $50,000, they say you should have $50,000 saved up by the time you reach 30. JP Morgan, they say by age 30, if you make $50,000, they say you should have $20,000 saved up. And at $150,000 of household income, you should have $120,000 saved up. So not quite 1 times your salary. This is, Grant, where we're starting to see some different numbers. Fidelity is a little different than JP Morgan, but it's starting to kind of get close to that 1 times your salary mark.
And I think this is going to be surprising to a lot of people. At 30, 1x salary. And the question is too, is if you get a job promotion, you get a sudden big pay increase, right? In our early 30s, we might be advancing in our career. And so the ability, if you start making 100-some thousand, to have that saved up might not be there. So I wouldn't stress necessarily about those particular numbers other than trying to really establish good, healthy savings habits. Taking advantage of your company match right now when you're in your 30s is going to be key.
And I should have said this at the beginning of the episode. These numbers are based on the assumption that your lifestyle right now, you're going to have that same lifestyle in retirement. So that's kind of the goal. That's where they get these numbers, is if you save this amount, that hopefully you'd have enough saved up that once you reach 65 and retire, you can kind of maintain that same quality of life.
Yeah, and there's different factors too around when you collect Social Security and some things like that. But generally the studies, I think, would fit most people's lives. Most people generally want to retire around in their mid-60s. That gets you to Medicare age for health insurance. And so it's a good rule of thumb to aim for that age for retirement for most people.
Perfect. Let's go on to 35. At 35, Fidelity said you should have 2 times your salary saved up. So again, if you make $50,000 a year as a household, they say you should have $100,000 saved up by the age 35. JP Morgan, however, at 35, if you make $50,000, they say you should have $40,000 saved, almost 1 times your salary. And at $150,000 of household income, you should have $240,000 so that's 1.5 times your salary, about that mark. And again, this is where the numbers are starting to kind of drift apart here. So some very different approaches, but I think if you can kind of see like where the ballpark of where you're in.
That's a good ballpark. And the other thing around our mid-30s that starts to creep in is if we have children, now on top of saving for retirement, we have to consider saving for education. Most likely in our mid-30s, we're now homeowners, so we have good old homeowner maintenance and those related costs. So we have a lot of things tugging at our wallet. And again, the discipline to start saving young so that it pays dividends in the future is going to be key. I think that the more aggressive numbers are a good like high bar to shoot for. And the conservative, a little bit lower numbers, I think are a little bit more average for our nation. It's going to depend too, do you have working spouses, how many children, things like that. So everybody's family is going to be different. I want to stress that. These are good rules of thumb, but because everyone's lives are so different, don't necessarily feel like you're falling behind if you don't have those particular numbers at this point in life.
Yeah, I think this decade is probably the most difficult decade to save because so many things you mentioned. You meet a lot of people saving for a house. They're trying to figure out their career. They're maybe not quite at those peak earning years yet. Yeah. You might have kids. You're also, a lot of people at this age are still paying off student loans. Mm-hmm. So there's just so much going on. But from some of the numbers that we've seen in so many studies and seeing the growth of that money, it's really important if you do have that extra money saved up to put that money into retirement early, because that can have a lot of time to grow. I
think the big thing is making sure you are at the very least contributing to a work retirement plan that has a company match. Again, aim for that 15% because then you should get the full company match in addition to your savings amount, and that's really going to help jumpstart your retirement for later in life.
Well, believe it or not, there's actually some new numbers that suggest this generation, the millennials, is outpacing other generations when it comes to saving for retirement. Jason Wheeler explains why many adults under 40 are leading the way.
This is why we toil for decades, isn't it? So that when we reach retirement age, we can just take in that picture here at work until the break's up and we got to get back to the job again. Yes, I am here again to be that annoying voice inside your head competing with all the other distractions in here, which admittedly are very interesting. Yeah, let's wedge in some retirement savings thinking though. Millennials, y'all know what I'm talking about because you are getting this right according to new data from a big asset management company. Look at the millennial contribution rates to their workplace retirement plans in this report. 16% on average. Compare that to a little less than 10% among Gen X and Boomer workers. Commit as much as you can, folks, because this is the median amount saved by each group in this report, and they conclude that many of us are not putting away enough. One other positive note for millennials, on average, they started contributing to their employer-sponsored retirement plans much younger than Gen X or baby boomers. In fairness, though, those plans were more novel and less understood when those workers were younger. But workers who are older than 50 can make up some ground with the catch-up. That's catch up, 2 words, but let's just go with this anyway. There is a cap on how much you can contribute to a plan like a 401k. This year, it's $22,500. If you are 50 plus, though, you get an additional catch-up contribution of $7,500. And a new federal rule requiring you to pay taxes on the catch-up was just delayed. So this year and the next 2 years, you can make those catch-up contributions from your paycheck before taxes are taken out. So you can set aside up to 30 grand a year in your workplace retirement fund tax-free. Not surprisingly, Vanguard finds that only about 16% of workers 50 plus are taking advantage of this, and it's mainly the higher paid employees who do. If you can afford it though, extra catch-up is a good thing. T. Rowe Price found that a saver who adds the extra $7,500 from the age of 50 to 65 could see their retirement savings increase $202,000 more than a person who doesn't add catch-up contributions.
Before we head into the 40s and 50s, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, our roadmap to retirement continues, so stay with us here on Your Money. Welcome back. We continue our roadmap to retirement heading into the 40s. If you want to retire on time, here's how much you should have saved up by the time you reach 40. Fidelity says by 40, you should have 3 times your salary saved up. JP Morgan at age 40 says if you make $50,000 a year in a household income, they want you to have $60,000. So finally, more than 1 times your annual salary here with JP Morgan's numbers. And at age 40 with $150,000 worth of household income, they say you should have $385,000. So at least 2 times your annual income. But again, this one is much lower than Fidelity. At age 40, there continues to be a lot going on in people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Life gets only busier and busier as we enter our 40s. I like JP Morgan's numbers a little bit better here than Fidelity's. Fidelity's, I think, are a little bit aggressive. One thing that we do have to take into account, though, is generally people are starting to live a longer life. Retirement no longer means retire at 65 and you maybe have 5-10 years in retirement. So retirement is extending. So that's why some of these studies are starting to increase the amount we need saved, so that way we can endure 15, 20 plus years of retirement. So while we have lots of demands on our income, as we're entering our 40s, what I would really want to focus on is your career path. 50s are going to be your peak earning years, where most likely you at least have some saved up for college and everything. So 40s, figuring out exactly where you want to be to maximize your earning potential and really start to shelter money, utilizing your retirement accounts and being very tax efficient.
And I think the 40s is a good time to really start thinking about retirement and what it might look like, because the first 20 years of your career, you're accumulating money, you're growing, but now that you're 40, you're kind of in the middle point of your journey before you retire to start thinking about, like, what are your goals? What do you want to start doing in retirement? And maybe think about reaching out to an advisor to see, hey, where am I at? Am I on track? How should I be investing this money? And
hopefully when we're in our 40s, student loan debt is gone. So if we had student loan debt, now repurposing that payment that might be in debt pay down to go into retirement savings. And you're absolutely right. Guidance earlier on can be extremely important to make sure you're putting money in the proper accounts, making sure that it's actually invested. This is one thing I see. People put a lot of money in savings accounts and they watch that grow because they're saving for a house, they were saving to buy cars, they're building up an emergency fund early on in life. And so they're used to utilizing savings accounts. In our 40s, if we're not investing and having our money work for us, there's some missed opportunities there.
Great. Let's move on to 45. At age 45, Fidelity says you should have about 4 times your salary saved up. JP Morgan says at 45, if you have a $50,000 household income, they want you to have $90,000. So about 2 times your salary there. And at age 45, with a household income of $150,000, they want you to have more than $500,000, $555,000. So at least 3 times your salary at this point with JP Morgan. And this is where I think we're really starting to get into this area where these numbers are starting to get big and a little overwhelming for a lot of folks.
Yeah. It is not too late if you are 40 or 45 and you have not started saving. I cannot emphasize that enough. There's a very famous saying in the retirement education and financial planner community: the best day to start saving was yesterday, and if you haven't, then start today. And so while these numbers seem huge, the reason why they do is because these studies are assuming you already had hit those milestones, 25, 30, 35. Yes. And so you had money growing, invested in the stock market. So these numbers aren't assuming that in all of a sudden in 1 year, 2, 3 years, you're putting large sums of money in. It's assuming you're doing the work earlier on. However, just because those numbers seem large, don't get discouraged. When we're in our around 45 or so, we're maybe around kids going to school, college, and things like that. So we're on the cusp of some other big expenses. We maybe have a teen driver in the house. We have to buy a car for them.
Yes.
Our insurance costs go up there. So the bottom line is there's always going to be demands on our cash flow. But what this study, what these big numbers show is that consistency over time will produce bigger results, which is why these numbers are starting to grow so much.
And going through these ages, I just always think of like what's, like you said, demanding on your wallet and what isn't. And I can think of so many things that aren't like, you know, if your kids are getting older, they might be moving out of the house. Okay, then you have less expenses there. They're not eating your food. They're not eating electricity. But then there's always something next. There's always something that replaces it.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, I'm in this mentality with my own life where it's like, if I can just get through this, then I'm going to be good. But it just seems like that doesn't exactly work out.
There is a sweet spot when our children get old enough, but before our parents are aging and we have to focus on potential healthcare costs there is a window coming up here in the 50s where you're at peak earning potential. Maybe you have adult children that are hopefully independent out of the house, and you don't yet quite have healthcare costs maybe for aging parents, where you can start to superfund savings. But you are right, in your 30s and 40s, life is busy. There's lots of moving pieces, and putting the building blocks together of good money habits, understanding cash flow, maximizing your employer match, you can kind of set it and forget it honestly, as long as you're doing those good habits. And if you are not starting them, again, big key.
Before we head into the 50s, we should go over the different types of retirement accounts that are out there and why it's a good idea to have more than one retirement account. Allison Gormley explains the differences between a 401k, IRA, and a Roth IRA account.
Saving for retirement is a process that works a lot like a roadmap.
The first thing to do is just to start thinking about where you're at and where you want to be.
To get to your destination, there are different retirement accounts or vehicles.
The reason why they exist is because we're different. So we're at different stages of life. We have different risk tolerances.
That means take a look at your life, from the money you are spending to the money you are saving. 401ks are retirement plans you can get through work. Individual retirement accounts you can get on your own. Each account type can have another option, Roth or traditional. Traditional, you pay taxes later, and Roth, you pay taxes now.
It's intimidating, but that's where the power of doing research and the power of talking to people can really be helpful.
Some of his discussion suggestions:
explain what a required minimum distribution is to me. You know, explain the difference between pre-tax and post-tax dollars. How does that impact me?
That way you can avoid wrong turns.
So now we're going to head into the 50s here, and this is going to be an interesting decade that we can talk a lot about. Fidelity says by age 50, you should have 6 times your annual salary saved up. JP Morgan says at age 50, if you have a $50,000 worth of household income, you should have $120,000 saved. And at age 50, with $150,000 of household income, they want you to have $750,000, $750,000. So 5 times your annual salary. And we said this in the 40s that these numbers are starting to get big and kind of insurmountable for some people. They're thinking that it's just, I'll never get that much. But you were saying before that this is a decade that people can really catch up with some of this retirement savings.
Your 50s are going to be your peak earning years. This should be when, assuming in your 20s and 30s you figured out career path, where you want to go in life. In our 50s, this should be when we're in our highest earning years, able to put away the most amount of money, maxing out our 401k plans at work, contributing to brokerage accounts if we have more money that we want to put towards retirement. We should already have money set aside a little bit for college. I encourage people in their 50s not to take out a bunch of debt for their students if we have adult kids going into college at this time. You can always borrow for college. You cannot borrow for retirement.
That's so true.
So in our 50s, while it may be tempting to help our child out, maybe pay some tuition, I'd rather see the kid take on the debt. And if you have extra money in the end, you can always help them out. but we need to really focus on retirement in our 50s. We maybe have 1.5 decades till retirement is here. And so we need to get the money in there. We need to get it invested into our various retirement accounts, depending upon your situation, and ensure that we are on track. If you have not met with somebody who's going to provide sound financial advice in your 50s, absolutely is when you should be start seeking professional guidance.
I think one of the biggest challenges in your 50s is actually going to be maybe lifestyle creep, because if you're making more money,
Yes.
you're going to start finding ways to spend that more money, increasing your lifestyle, living a more lavish life if you're making more money. And, you know, from what I hear from people in my life is that, you know, maybe in your late 40s to your 50s, this might be where a midlife crisis comes in. You might want to go buy a convertible or a car or do something crazy, or start kind of trying to live a life of retirement. And I feel like that's a big challenge, is to maybe like stick with your plan, and if you stick with that plan, when you reach your 60s, then you can do some of those things.
I know we're preaching safer retirement, safer retirement. However, I will temper that with, it is important to still enjoy life.
Yes.
And balancing your future self and your current happiness, I think, is important. And again, I think that's where a third party who is unemotional and can look at your situation, a financial advisor, can help you gauge where you are. Additionally, I see most of the successful people, most of the successful clients I have, when they're in their 50s, they're getting the pay raises, they're getting the bonuses. They intentionally take a portion, put it for some fun, and a portion and put it in retirement and don't look at it. So again, the big thing is intentionality when we're getting these bonuses, so that way we don't have to worry about keeping up with the Joneses. And again, these numbers being so big, I think, is an important wake-up call to anybody who maybe needs to catch up. If you are behind and you're getting these big bonuses now's not the time to buy that convertible. Now's the time to just put those bonuses away in our retirement accounts if we need to jumpstart it.
I think that idea of automating your savings and like forcing yourself every paycheck, it's gone before you really see it. I think that can be so powerful, because I've seen it in my own situation where like you at first you're like, oh my gosh, I'm putting all this money away before I can spend it, but you adjust to it, and as long as you can cover your normal basic needs, the extra money it's out of sight, kind of out of mind, and I think that's so powerful.
Automation is the key to success. Willpower only gets you so far.
Yes.
So thinking, oh, you know what, here's the money I'm going to try to save, and then at the end of the month, oops, it's gone. And then that happens again and again. So automating savings, having automatic 401k contributions, having automatic contributions to brokerage accounts, Roth IRAs, depending upon your income, that's going to be the key to success. So that way you can't let your lifestyle creep up. You can also consider, as you're getting pay increases, incrementally increasing your 401k contribution rate as well. So that way you maybe get a little bit of a raise, maybe it's a couple $100 a month, which lets you do something fun, but you don't let the lifestyle dramatically rise and increase. The issue with lifestyle creep too is, if we're used to spending more and more and more and more, when retirement comes around the corner, if we haven't adjusted our expectations, that's going to push retirement later. That's going to mean we're going to need to cut in retirement. It's going to have all sorts of implications.
And let's move on to 55 here. Fidelity at 55 says you should have 7 times your annual salary. And that's at $50,000 for JP Morgan. They want you to have $155,000. At age 55 and your household income is $150,000, they want you to have $970,000. So almost $1 million, just over 6 times your salary here. That's again, getting big numbers, but I think a big important thing for people to realize too is this is the decade where you can be catching up, and this is where the catch-up bonus for retirement accounts kind of kicks in. Is that a 55?
Yeah, above 50 and 55. There are different milestones, 50, 55, 59 and a half, and all these big milestones coming up in our 50s that we have to be aware of. Catch-up contributions are an amazing tool if we are behind, that allows us to put extra money into retirement accounts. Not a lot, but there are different kinds of accounts. There are 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, and there are joint brokerage accounts. And the IRS dictates how much money we can put into those vehicles depending upon our income and our ages. Being aware of all those rules is what financial people like me love, and working through all that minutia. If you don't like that and figuring all that out, again, seek an independent third party that's a fiduciary that acts in your best interest. Again, when we're in our mid-50s, we want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for retirement now. I'd be thinking about things like, do you have adult children coming back home, which is very common nowadays? Are they going to be paying rent or whatnot, or do you want to downsize your home? The number of cars you have. I would start to think about adjusting our lifestyles. The other thing, too, is $1 million seems like a lot of money to a lot of people, and it is certainly. But remember, when we're in retirement, we have a long life ahead of us.
Yes.
And so thinking, wow, that's a lot of money, I can never spend it. I see this happen a lot, where all of a sudden people have their fixed monthly income, but then, oops, they want to go on another vacation, or they need to buy something, need to contribute towards a wedding cost, a down payment on a home for their adult children who have gotten married. Other big expenses creep in there. And so really being mindful, I think, in our late 50s of exactly what's going on in our finances is going to be key.
And at age 50 and 55, some people are just starting out on their retirement journey, which is, okay, you still have time to save for retirement, but how much of your paycheck should go into retirement? Chris Radcliffe shares another perspective on how to plan for retirement.
The more of your income you save, the sooner you will grow your wealth and set yourself up for retirement. But what should that look like? Certified financial planner Neil Vanoy explains.
Common rule of thumb has been to invest 10% of your pre-tax earnings. But if you want to improve your chances for a secure retirement, or maybe becoming financially independent early in life, I always suggest 15%, if not more. Be sure to include any match that you get from your employer in that percentage you're saving. For example, if you want to save 10% and you get a 4% match from your employer, you would only need to forego 6% from your paycheck to get to that 10% goal.
Unless you are making a very comfortable income, Neil says you should feel what you are saving.
I tell clients that if they're comfortable with the amount of money they're putting in their 401k and other investment accounts, they might not be saving enough. If you're not dedicating as much as you should to reach your financial goals, try increasing the percentage you save by a small percentage each month. For a lot of people, that's easier than jumping up to that higher percentage all at once.
And then there's the age-old question. Do you pay taxes now or in the future by investing in a Roth IRA or a traditional?
In general, investors that expect to be in a higher tax bracket in retirement are better off contributing to a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. Those aren't tax deductible now, but then withdrawals will be tax-free in retirement. If you are in that higher tax bracket, that would help you out. It's a good idea to build up a mix of different account types. You want to have pre-tax money that you get to deduct now, and you want to have tax-free money from Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks, along with just a regular investment account that gets favorable lower capital gains rates. Having a mix of different account types that are taxed differently will help you respond to no matter what Congress throws our way in the future.
And then there's this. Where do you make your investments and the risks that you take in either stocks or bonds? And it's going to depend on your age and your financial risk-taking status.
The correct mix of asset classes will depend on things like your age, your risk tolerance, your time horizon for your goals. Viewers can go to websites like Morningstar.com, SmartAsset.com, and Bankrate.com to find asset allocation calculators that'll help them come up with the right mix of investments for them.
We're heading into the 60s now. We'll show you the numbers right after the break, plus the extra costs in retirement you might not be planning for, why it's important to think about life moments like weddings and travel, and how those big expenses can affect your numbers. So stay with us here on Your Money. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on this roadmap to retirement. If you're just joining us, we are breaking down the numbers for retirement, how much money you need to save for your retirement to retire on time. We're heading into the 60s now. Fidelity says by age 60, you should have 8 times your salary saved up. JP Morgan, however, says at age 60, if you make $50,000 as a household, they want you to have $195,000 saved up, so about 4 times your salary, half of what Fidelity says. At $150,000 worth of household income, they say you should have $1.2 million saved up, so 6.5 times your annual salary. 60 is really starting to get to be that age where retirement is becoming a reality. It's just just around the corner for a lot of people.
And usually when we're in our 60s, we've hit our peak earning years, we're in the twilight of our career, and hopefully we've had a successful run. The one thing I start to talk about with people in their 60s is their kind of second act. What do they really want to do when they grow up?
Yeah.
They've, raised kids potentially, they've gotten married, they've bought the house, they've done the vacations, and now it's kind of about them. The kids hopefully are successful and out of the house. And what I find is, it sounds fun to retire. We're right on the cusp. And sometimes when you have those bad days in the office and you're like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here. We all have those days. But then you retire and you clean the house a little bit, you go golfing, you go on some trips, and then you realize, I'm kind of bored.
Yeah.
Often I see people bored right away in retirement, which is surprising. So if I were going to coach somebody when they're in their right around age 60, I would really start to challenge them to think about when they're not in their current career, what's going to fill their time?
Yes.
What's going to get them out of bed every day, give them purpose? Maybe can they add back into the community? Maybe they can do some coaching and help educate people and spread their expertise around to the next generation. So that way, when you're 60, you're making those plans and exploring those options. So when retirement comes, you're prepared. You can go on the fun trips, but then maybe it's opening up a new business that you always wanted to. We've seen lots and lots of baby boomers opening up businesses. Maybe it's volunteering at different places. And so in your 60s, yes, if you haven't started, you need to jumpstart retirement. But also, maybe you'll be earning some income from a side job that you might enjoy. I've seen people who have been in high-stress executive jobs go work at a grocery store and love it because they can go and talk to people, and then they leave and they don't have to check email, and they get interaction and they get to move their bodies rather than sitting at a desk. So I think that this idea we need to save a huge sum of money and then completely quit working is probably no longer the status quo in retirement. So planning out a second job potentially and factoring that into retirement calculations are going to be key. And again, at 60, earlier on in our life, it's more about good habits. Are we just saving enough? But when we get to be 60, there is some precision involved around retirement. There are certain milestones on when you can and cannot collect Social Security. If you do, how much money you can earn. We need to worry about health insurance and some benefits. So at 60, you need to be aware of certain rules that goes on with taxation. The other thing I like to see at 60, estate planning, making sure you have a will, healthcare director, durable power of attorney in place, and getting that established. So that way, if you are out traveling and you're abroad, your assets are all taken care of in case something were to happen to you.
That's a great idea. Let's move on to 65 here. Actually, 67 in Fidelity's metrics here. They say at 67, you should have 10 times your annual salary saved up. JP Morgan, they have 65. They say if you make $50,000 at your household income, you should have $220,000 saved up. And at $150,000 in household income, you should have $1.3 million saved up. So 8.5 times your salary compared to the 10 times your salary for Fidelity. And we were just talking about this with the 60s. I think that's such a great idea once you get into the 60s and 65 age range, is that if you are starting to think about retirement, but the numbers don't quite add up yet, a great idea is to get that second job that is less stress. You may not make as much as your primary career,
that's okay,
but you can, as long as it's covering your living expenses, you allow your retirement money to grow, to continue to grow until you retire. And I've been hearing a lot of people will kind of do that second act well into their 70s because they enjoy it so much. It gives them fulfillment. Maybe they're working part-time, 4 days a week. And that I can see a lot more people going that route in the future.
It's a phenomenal strategy, like you said. If you're used to earning a lot of money, and all of a sudden your income goes from $120,000 down to $40,000, you think, shoot, I'm not earning as much as I used to. but that's okay if you're not pulling out of retirement funds. So if you do your best to save, and then in your 60s, you go work for maybe a little bit of health insurance till 65, which is Medicare, and maybe you want to work until your full retirement age for Social Security, which is 67, why 65 and 67 are used is because of those two important milestones. So maybe if you can work until your mid-60s and maybe early 70s, again, at a job that maybe you find fulfillment in, that can allow your retirement portfolio to grow and delay withdrawing on it. I have seen many people, I know one person took a job teaching swim classes, then they worked at a coffee shop, moved on to a grocery store. They started working in a clinic, just taking people, doing like inpatient and checking people in. And they got to experience a whole variety of careers and industries that they had never been a part of and found that really invigorating. And the pressure's off, hopefully, if you've had your retirement portfolio built now, to go earn and save. It's more just meeting our lifestyle expenses and having something fun to do and spreading a little bit of joy in the community.
Sounds great. Before you make any decisions, though, in retirement, it's important to consider your spending in retirement. A lot of the numbers we showed you today are based on the idea that your standard of living right now will be the same once you reach retirement. But if you're planning to spend more than you do now on travel and other luxuries, then you need to save even more, as Sharon Coe explains.
So what's your number? $1 million, 2, maybe 3 to live comfortably?
The bigger issue is $1 million what it used to be? And we know because of inflation, it's not. And $1 million doesn't go near as far today as it did 20, 30 years ago.
Captures principal and financial advisor Carl Egger says figure out how much you'll need and work backwards.
What are some of those big ticket items? Are you paying for a wedding? Are you paying for college education? Do you want to budget for trips every year? Factor all of that into a plan so you can figure out what is it going to take, how much do I have to save and earn to get to a number that's going to sustain that lifestyle and all those expenses for the rest of my life.
To pull it off, this is where the power of compounding comes into play. Our imaginary friends are going to show you the impact of investments over time. Jack stayed focused, investing $200 starting at 25. Jill, who partied a little too hard, started a decade later, same amount. It's easy to see the ending here. This is another situation. Jack made $200 of investments every month starting at age 25. Jill started at age 35. Even if Jack stopped contributing after 10 years, he would still have more than her by retirement.
Don't always live up to what your income is. If you live beneath your means or below your means, you will tend to have more cash flow and tend to have more savings in the future.
Last tip from Eggers.
Diversifying and not taking excessive risk in one or two companies is typically the way most people will accomplish their financial goals.
And I think that news story right there is a great way to end it, is to, before you transition into retirement, think about what it's going to look like. What are your goals? What do you want retirement to be like? They talk about weddings, they talk about travel. There's a lot of things that could drastically change your numbers at this stage of life.
A lot of people think, though, that their retirement, that they'll spend less in it, which is a fallacy. Most studies show you spend similar amounts of money. Maybe, yes, you don't have gas money or money for work clothes or kids' activities, but that gets replaced with other things. I think generally you want to at least aim for around 80% to about 100% of where you're spending right now as a rough rule of thumb. And then you can do the math from there about how big of a portfolio we need to support that lifestyle. Very rarely do I see people exponentially increase their expenses throughout retirement. What you more typically see is you have a pattern called the go-go, and then slow-go, and then no-go, where early on in retirement, we're young, relatively speaking, we're healthy, we've been putting off those big trips because we've been working, and then you go do all the travel and you spend a little bit more. Then when you get to maybe your 80s, you've done all the trips and you want to be around for grandkids and you don't need to be jetting off necessarily to every place. You're still healthy, relatively speaking, so you don't have high healthcare costs, you don't have travel costs, and your expenses actually come down. And then towards the later end of life, we have the no-go phase. And it's no-go because generally that's when we have health issues. So that's when we're going to be increasing our expenses a little bit and spending on healthcare costs towards end of life. So we often see retirement income starts high, our retirement income needs starts high, decreases a little bit, and then comes back up a little bit later in life. And that's the path that we see many of our clients take, and study after study kind of supports this retirement smile, they call it, where retirement expenses do vary a little bit based upon your age.
Well, I know we gave the viewers a lot of information, a lot of numbers. I hope this was helpful for all of you, kind of seeing where you're at and where, if you need to boost your savings or if you're right on target. And I wanted to thank you, Grant, for coming on the show.
Thank
and this was a lot of fun. We'll have to do some more episodes like this in the future.
Sounds great.
Well, that'll do it for us here on Your Money. I'm Gordon Severson, helping you save, spend, and invest your money wisely. I'll see you next time.